Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Today's stream is one of the few ones that is very Apple light, though we still have some Apple news today, though they're kind of far fetched. So, yeah, we are focusing on Nintendo today. Obviously, yesterday was the Nintendo Switch 2 announcement, or small video teaser before we have to wait 2.5 months before shit gets more real, and then another 2.5 to 3 months before shit goes on sale. Yeah, I'm really unsure about this one. That's why my thinking pose is in the thumbnail. Not that it's like, I'm not gonna say it's bad because we haven't seen yet the Nintendo Switch 2 like doing actually shit. But we are gonna talk about it. And Dream SMP is in the chat. Haven't seen you in a while, saying, "Hey Mark, I'm back." Well, Dream SMP, I'm back too. Though I have been back for a while, so my holiday break has definitely ended for a little bit now. That being said, here is actually the Nintendo announcement. Now I am running this on mute for monetization purposes, but also for just channel security purposes. I'm not actually sure what happens like if you cross Nintendo. I think it's one thing if this video were to be demonetized. It's not like I make a crazy amount on the ads on these videos, but yeah, I just don't want to get my channel striked by Nintendo ninja lawyers. So yeah, that's about it. Before we get into this crazy detailed announcement by Nintendo, by the company we so famously always cover on this channel, I want to remind you guys to please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment. I love hearing you in the live chat, of course, but I also love having your comments afterwards because that helps with the algorithm. That's primarily the reason. But also, I love you guys and I love your opinions. I love your agreements, your disagreements, and the opportunity to debate with you, of course. And not everything is done for the algorithm here. Just chill. But also, you can support the channel directly by leaving a small donation via super chat or super sticker. Whenever I'm live, you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve for all MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. Or you can become a supporter over on Patreon. There are a few different tiers there, from a free one just for you to communicate with me to some that range all the way up to MarkTech Pro Max as well. So plenty of opportunity to connect, plenty of ways to help the community grow here. So with all that being said, let's actually look at the Nintendo Switch 2. And thankfully, I actually put it in the title that it's the Nintendo Switch 2 because for some reason I was paranoid that I have just called it the Nintendo Switch announcement. So you see, the company that makes the Nintendo Switch 2 is Nintendo. It's a very obscure Japanese company, like famously known for just making cards. So yeah, but now they're getting into the console space a little bit more seriously. So you might have missed this specific product. I mean, I guess you could say it's sort of like an iPad, right? It's kind of like a tablet-y thing. So I believe they sold about 146 units of those worldwide. So I'm not surprised that you might not know it. It's kind of like a video game console-ish, but it's designed for you to actually take it with you. And I think it actually has a USB-C port even. So in that way, it actually was ahead of the iPhones when, of course, it took us all the way up to the iPhone 15 series for Apple to introduce USB-C. But it comes after the 2015 12-inch MacBook, which was, of course, one of the first big consumer devices with USB-C. So, yeah, this is a little bit of a trailblazer here. It's a device with pretty incredible hardware, especially this specific unit. Like, it has a 7-inch TFT screen, like TFT screen famously being a lot better than IPS panels at everything, like contrast contrast and color reproduction and brightness levels, right? So it's an amazing piece of hardware. It's just that unfortunately it's underappreciated, just didn't sell enough. But now we are getting a sequel to it. So, famously, Apple has been kind of giving up on moving parts, like hard drives, for example, in their devices. But these controller thingies, they connect to your tablet. Let's just call it the Nintendo iPad Mini, right? And so, yeah, you can control your things. So it has a touch screen. Famously, a lot of people don't know that, right? Obviously, we know touchscreens from our Apple devices, right? But it is to be mentioned that other devices beyond Apple also have touchscreens, right? And this is one of those touchscreen devices, but you play games with these buttons, right? With the button pad, the arrow pad, I believe it's called, the letter pad and stuff like that, right? So famously, this is more of a gamery thing. So and it doesn't have, unfortunately, the right aspect ratio. Like most iPads are in the 4:3 to 3:2 range. This is a wide screen. This is a 16:9 panel. So unfortunately, it's not the ideal more portable product, but hey, Nintendo's kind of new at this. So let's see what they're doing to actually improve on this product, and if it actually gets like a more squared aspect ratio similar to the iPads. And of course, maybe it potentially goes all the way for a multi-touch experience, right? That would be kind of rad. Um, Obviously, we all know from Apple that buttons are kind of overrated at this point. I mean, like, remember when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone? He said, like, you use it with a stylus, you lose it, right? Yuck. So we are just going to use the multi-touch input devices that we are all born with, unless you have some kind of genetic disease. We all have 10 fingers. Don't feel, please, discriminated if you actually don't have 10 fingers. So, yeah, maybe the sign that they're showing these being basically slided away is indicative of the fact that now they're going all in on multi-touch, going all in on basically like a more iPad mini competitor, maybe having a chip that is more competitive with like the Apple A series as well. So let's see. Oh, it's gotten larger, so it's more like a iPad Mini Pro, like what a lot of people wish for, right? So a larger screen. You can even argue slimmer bezels, though obviously, like by the standards of an iPhone, those are thick bezels. But maybe if they are actually going all in on multi-touch, then famously you need larger bezels for touch rejection, right? That's why even the iPad Pro, which has pretty thin bezels, has not gone all the way crazy to like 1 millimeter thin bezels, similar to like what the iPhone 16 Pro is offering. So it's a very, very interesting choice here. Hopefully that gives them some room to also like cool their, I believe it's an N series chip. So, I mean, if Apple has A series chips, I kind of have to guess that Nintendo ships their products with an N series chips. Let's see what it means for cooling. Maybe there will go into detail whether or not this has like a vapor chamber heat sink or something like that. Or maybe they will discuss if they have like a copper Nintendo logo on the back, similar to how the iPad Pro features a copper Apple logo. So that would be fascinating. Let's see what exactly they're doing. So very iPad Pro reminiscent intro. When you remember, like when Apple made the M4 iPad Pro, they showed it. Well, actually, more like even like the 2018 iPad Pro redesign, right? You remember how Apple like took out the home button and pressed it in to make it thinner, right? So this is very much inspired by that. You can really feel that Nintendo is feeling the heat from the competition of Apple's iPad minis, famously one of Apple's best-selling products. Let's see how else they change it. So we have a USB-C port here with some screws. So maybe this will be a little bit more DIY friendly than the average Apple product. We have some buttons, so that's not very modern, unfortunately. Like for Apple, we've been discussing for years and years potentially the removal of buttons. Unfortunately, then Apple kind of also went back on that promise and gave us even more buttons, like the action button and now camera control. So if you were somebody who really hoped that the Nintendo Switch 2 would have like swipe buttons, right, similar to like that multi-touch thing that we have hoped the iPhone would get for a while, and similar to what camera control does. No, it has pretty simple clicky buttons, so that's a bit unfortunate. It has a second USB-C port. Fun fact, there's actually no iPhone or iPad to have two USB-C ports. There's also no iPhone or iPad left in the current gen lineup, which has a headphone jack. So this definitely will be a more productivity-focused device, I'm sure, because obviously having two USB ports gives you the freedom to charge on one side and then connect other accessories, maybe like a mouse or a keyboard, depending, maybe you don't have Bluetooth yet or something like that. Or you can even do what I'm doing, like my earpods are connected through the USB-C port. So this is definitely where it pulls ahead of even the M4 iPad Pro, and one wonders what crazy Thunderbolt controller they have on a tablet to have like two USB-C ports on there, which I'm sure are all like full USB 4, 40 gigabits in either direction speeds. So this is something where they have obviously been inspired by their other major competitor. Yes, I'm of course talking about the Microsoft Surface lineup, right, which have always featured docks. Apple has preferred or a kickstand, right? Famously, Apple tries to rely more on other accessories to allow for that functionality on the iPad with stuff like the Magic Keyboard. So this is where they're going a little bit more of the Microsoft route. I wonder if they are thinking now that Microsoft is uniting Windows and Xbox a little bit more, maybe the Surface tablets can become a bigger competitor to it. So maybe that's why they improve greatly on the kickstand versus like the kickstand that was on the original Nintendo Switch, which was kind of like very finicky and very thin and very easy to break. So similar to Microsoft, they also have a very wide angle of usage on their kickstand. So this is obviously a slight against Apple's Magic Keyboard, and how limited the angles are, even for like the $350 very expensive version. So that's definitely an advantage they have here. So if you were gonna open up like an office program here, right? I mean, you could conceivably connect like your keyboard right there, and now you would have like this very comfortable angle. I guess if you connect it with a stylus, you could also draw. So maybe this becomes like your device to create, like, I don't know, thumbnails for your YouTube video, because I hear even some people can actually draw. I cannot. So maybe for some people it's actually usable that way. So very, very interesting choices. You can definitely feel the competition here heating up between like the M4 iPad Pro and this device. So these controller thingies, you can see they are going pro. How can we tell that they're going pro? Well, we as Apple community members, right, we of course know that darker colors are more pro, right? So being vibrant is more of like an like an not even like an SE thing, because colors are usually too expensive to implement on cheap devices. But yeah, it's more like a regular iPhone thing or like an iPad Air thing, right? And whenever Apple goes pro, usually their devices go larger or thicker, and they lose a lot of those colors. So this is, maybe you could even call this not like the Nintendo Switch 2, but like the Nintendo Switch Pro, right? Because it's losing like those colors, it's getting a little larger. So yeah, definitely some interesting choices. They're probably aiming at competing more in the high-end segment here, because obviously like the iPad Pro starts at $1,000. That's currently for an 8 gigs of RAM version with 256 gigabytes of storage, no 5G, and the 11-inch form factor. So they're probably eyeing like a around the same price. I mean, the iPad does not have these kinds of controllers, so that's definitely a big disadvantage for Apple. And if this comes in slightly below $1,000, that would make it, of course, very competitive. Okay, so I see it was like infected with something and got like a little bit of a skin disease here internally. I mean, that's okay. There are dermatologists out there who can help you. Okay, okay. So it has even more buttons than I even thought. Um, like one button and then two buttons and a hole in here. So that's interesting. Of course, the iPad does not have so many extra buttons and doesn't have extra holes. So I wonder what that is for. Okay, okay. So that one is more blue than the other one. Okay, okay, okay. So it has the buttons are actually clickable. That's fascinating. I mean, like I've already pointed out that sometimes with like Apple's future buttons, but I would argue even like their current ones, right? Like their magic trackpad and stuff like that, right? Sometimes you click a button, but it doesn't actually like clicks in. It just vibrates against your finger. So maybe so I thought maybe that's what they were going for here, right? So that way those buttons could be much more long living. But it seems like we are actually looking at very traditional buttons that you can actually click. So that's very fascinating. Okay, okay. There's like this. I guess they're kind of like mouses, because yes, there's the plural for PC mouse is not mice, which I'm actually not sure if it's mouses either, but I know it's not mice. You can see they're kind of racing around, having fun. So my only expectation from this is that they, of course, have cooperated with Valve, the company that makes Steam, and so they brought most likely CS2 to the Nintendo Switch 2 here. I mean, it just vibes so well, right? CS2, Nintendo Switch 2. It's just such a logical fit. And now having those mouses, which of course will give you much better input than any touchscreen. I hope it's a 360 hertz screen built in, so that you actually have great response time, so you can actually react really fast to what's happening on screen. so you can get a very good kill to death ratio. Yeah, but it's very interesting. I don't know the pull rate of like these mouses, right? Whether like they basically update their input like every like thousands time per second, or however often. Maybe they're competitive with the latest pro like Logitech mouses and stuff like that, but I unfortunately cannot tell you that from this. Obviously, for anybody using a Magic Mouse, right, it's immediately clear to see how much more ergonomic this is than a Magic Mouse, right? The Magic Mouse, of course, being famous for being super flat, not being very good on your wrist and stuff like that. Obviously, multi-touch reliant, which is, of course, better, but that's a little bit less so in the gaming space because I don't know if you know, but actually, when you are playing, for example, shooters, then multi-touch input is actually a little bit slower than having dedicated buttons to click, to have like a really nice like input. So swiping up and down is just a tiny bit slower than actually clicking a button on the mouse, which yeah, so this is why a lot of PC stuff is still like very, very much like not on the Mac, unfortunately. So you can see how it combines, right? So that's actually really, really cool. Nintendo, of course, has discovered magnets. We, of course, famously know that Apple is the first company to discover magnets with technologies like MagSafe. I mean, like, come on, right? But it's very good to see that other companies are paying Apple licensing rights so they can actually access that kind of magnet technology, combine the Switch with its controllers. Very, very cool. So, giving us a lot of different input options simultaneously. I wonder how you would use the mouse if like, I mean, you're supposed to connect that. I wonder if you could have one of the controllers disconnected and just being used as a mouse, similar to what I'm doing now, right? Versus, of course, then we would have this still connected, and yeah, maybe that could work, or maybe then you would rely on the multi-touch for certain inputs. That's, of course, going to be very interesting, but also probably game to game dependent. So I don't want to promise you. I actually have not heard too much in that regard. Um, Let's see. This is just basically like promotional footage coming together. So you can clearly see that it's a nice 3D render. Definitely a high quality promotion thing here. So let's actually see like how it all basically comes together, right? You can still see those little skin lesions, unfortunately, for the controller things. Max Maximus, one of our long-term Arctic Pro Max supporters, asking WTF in the chat. So yeah, it's a very interesting product. So I understand it. Obviously, we don't cover too much Apple, non-Apple stuff here. So I just wanted to really like get into the details and show you guys that obviously I have knowledge about technology beyond just Apple stuff, right? I know it's always a little bit iffy, like, you know, those Apple sheep, right? Sometimes they don't know jack about like other tech, even about Android stuff and things like that. And obviously, when it comes to gaming, so there's a lot of like stereotypes here. But yeah, I just wanted to really cover this. So don't be like too shocked that I know so much. But also thank you, of course, for not using direct expletives and using an abbreviation like WTF. So thank you very much here. Okay, so you're laughing out loud. That's good. Like I really try to entertain you guys. I know this is a little bit more of a boring video. It's a little bit more like analytical, but I do believe that it's still like it is going to be a help for anyone who might have bad stereotypes about like the Apple community, not understanding like, oh yeah, we actually do care about other hardware. We are actually interested. So interestingly, thus far they really haven't gone inside the product. So I was curious if they would have like a die shot of the what I would assume to be like the N2 chip, right, to power the Switch 2. Maybe it would be like the NS2 or something like that. But we are getting like I believe it's Mario Turismo 8, right? So it's the racing game featuring, of course, Mario, a famous Nintendo character. So I believe it's a Greek plumber. So don't get too confused. Yeah, he's also a racer. And yeah, there are already dozens and hundreds of people analyzing like how many race cars you can have here and stuff like that. I'll leave it to those people. But yeah, definitely looking forward to Mario Turismo. Wait, 8 or would it be 9 at this point? I'm actually not sure. Feel free to let me know later in the comment section which entry this is. Maybe it's like a hard reboot. I mean, it could be like Mario Turismo X or XX, right? Something like that. But the visuals are okay. There's nothing crazy here. So I'm assuming it's a chip kind of on the level of the M4. So let's see. We'll get to know the rest of the hardware about the system in like the next 40 seconds. So that's the dock. Yeah, you can connect it that way to your TV or monitor, of course. A monitor, of course, being nice if you have like a really nice high refresh rate monitor. Now that you also have that mouse functionality, I'm sure that will help as well with your reaction times and be a much, much better product for pro gamers. I mean, this is why I alluded to how this could have been in many ways called the Nintendo Switch Pro, for example, but it is the Nintendo Switch 2, yes. I mean, the 2 is right there. Okay, and this is basically how the controllers connect to a different controller. So a lot of different magnet stuff, basically. And it's coming in 2025. So that's really cool. It actually, so it has still discs, right? So it still supports physical media, unlike what Apple is doing. So if you are really a disc collector here, the Nintendo Switch 2 being able to play original Switch games here. I mean, I know most of you likely don't own a Switch because, as I said, it was a pretty obscure seller. But at the same time, I do have to say that, yeah, this is a very, very good move for anyone who still chooses to collect physical media and stuff like that. Though some stuff might not be connected, so I'm not sure if maybe they're doing like what Apple did when they went from 32-bit apps to 64-bit, right? Maybe at some point they'll just have to cut off a lot of old software. But for now, they are keeping it a little bit on the down low what their exact decisions are here. And is that over? So this is, of course, being the biggest mystery here that we have seen, and that is people were not able to decipher what date is actually shown here. So this is a 4, this is a 2, right? So naturally, a lot of us dumb Europeans and people across the world thought, yeah, we would get that on the 4th of February, right? So which, I mean, it makes too much sense to actually get more in like 3 weeks. But no, this is actually Pakistan timing, and famously, America here is actually like coming in and cannibalizing, of course, and imperializing on the correct ways to do the numbering here. And actually, this is unfortunately the 2nd of April, just one day after April Fools. I'm sure there will be absolutely no opportunity for anyone to do any kind of misleading shit with those days so close to each other. But this is a risk that Nintendo was willing to accept. There will also be hands-on events, so I assume that's just so people can still give them feedback. Maybe they will end up canceling the product if maybe nobody comes to those events, right? I mean, they probably have like a few dozen of these ready to go at that point. And if nobody likes them, they will just say, you know what, we're just going to bring our games to the iPad mini and just be done with it, right? Yeah, and that's actually all. You can still see the familiar orange tone of Nintendo. So definitely a nice sequel. So we unfortunately have not gotten details on if the chip, for example, is like designed to compete with the A18 Pro and the M4 chip, whether or not it's built on a brand new node like N3E or even potentially N3P, or maybe it's utilizing slightly older technology like N4P. So we unfortunately just cannot tell, but hopefully we'll be able to pretty soon. Yeah, that's about it for today's Nintendo Switch 2 coverage. I'm actually very, very glad I was able to cover this because, yeah, we don't always get to cover like gaming hardware and stuff like that. So just for today, I thought I might surprise you guys and bringing something beyond the Apple world. In the Apple world, there's actually not too much stuff happening right now. So the two most major things I have found for you are Nintendo. I'm sorry, you can see Nintendo's on my mind. So this is coming from Sonny Dixon. I apologize, who famously leaks a lot of like Apple dummies shortly before a product actually launches. And similar to the Nintendo Switch 2, we expect to see more of the iPhone SE4 in April. So these are dummies based on the leaks and rumors and maybe on the supply chain stuff for the iPhone SE4. Usually Sony Dixon also gets the colors quite right. So whether or not this means that the iPhone SE4 remains to be limited to a very small selection of colors, in this case black and white. You can also see that it has a singular camera, like what we have discussed before, it most likely being a 48 megapixel shooter that will allow you to do a 2x crop onto like 12 megapixels in the center of the sensor. So that way Apple will be able to claim basically two zoom ranges at 24 or 22 millimeters and then at 48 or 44. I'm not actually exactly sure. So that's interesting. No Apple logo here, probably for legal reasons. We have not yet gotten confirmation on a few things, like whether or not this like supports MagSafe, for example. I really hope it does. I mean, it's based on the iPhone 14 chassis, so obviously the space internally is there, especially once you consider that it has one fewer cameras than the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. So yeah, it's very interesting to see if what they're going to make of this. Obviously, we have heard a bunch of other rumors about it having like an 18 chip, 8 gigs of RAM, Now, over time, we've also heard about stuff like it potentially inheriting the action button from newer iPhone models. This one still shows it with the mute switch, so Apple might just be withholding certain features just to make sure that this device is like very recognizably lower end and doesn't cannibalize too many sales from like the iPhone 16. Well, the Pro models are still quite a little bit ahead of that, so maybe down the line, maybe if like the iPhone 17 Air doesn't succeed too much, that would be interesting. But yeah, for now, that is the iPhone that we are getting soon. It is going to be Apple's cheapest iPhone. It is going to definitely be a help in Europe, where they stopped selling a lot of models that are based on Lightning, and those are, of course, their models which are cheapest. So they will need soon a USB-C successor to those products that actually exists in like the 500-600 or at least like the 700 euro space. Yeah, so nothing too crazy here. I mean, we still expect it to come with a notch rather than a dynamic island. Again, a differentiation point. Also, probably a way to just lower prices by doubling down on the supply chain for already existing iPhone 14 parts. And then all the other stuff like we've discussed, like the potential inclusion of Apple's modems, seemingly no camera control, but honestly, that would have surprised me here quite a bit. For one, camera control is not the cheapest button to integrate. I mean, with its sapphire lens cover and stuff like that. So, yeah, those compromises that we see here make a lot of sense, especially if Apple is targeting a price around the $500 range. But speaking of more expensive products, now this comes from Chinese tech news site My Drivers, and to be totally honest with you guys, I actually have no idea what their track record is here. But we have heard from people like Bloomberg's Mark Gurman that Apple would potentially introduce vapor chamber heatsinks in the iPhone 17 generation. Most relevantly, he talked about the iPhone 17 Pro Max, but according to this source, it would be basically part of the entire iPhone 17 family: the regular iPhone 17, the iPhone 17 Air, the 17 Pro, and the 17 Pro Max. It's being described here as a way to improve cooling, of course. Vapor chambers work by spreading heat evenly across a larger surface area. Well, depending on how you build them. But yes, that is probably the biggest goal you would have. Yeah, especially in a passively cooled device, like surface area is pretty much everything, right? At least with an actively cooled device, you can tune your fan curve, you can make your fans larger to move more air, right? And therefore take better advantage of even potentially a smaller surface area to cool. But in this case, yeah, with no active cooling whatsoever here. The more cooling material you have and the larger you make it, the better. There are some other factors. Obviously, you cannot just make everything like 0.01 millimeters thick and just spread it over an infinitely large area, because a chip just gets still hot in the center, and it will not be able to that quickly dissipate all that heat over a giant surface area. But also, the iPhone does not have that kind of surface area to begin with. But anybody who knows how iPhones are currently cooled, there's definitely still like an area where you can definitely tell, well, this is where the main chip is, this is where the main heat is generated and stuff like that. So by being able to spread it hopefully through more of the actual product, we will be able to see the iPhone either being cooler on average or being able to handle higher power consumption. It's rumored to be moving to the N3P node, so there is not a super large efficiency gain in sight, unfortunately, for the iPhone 17 family. Maybe something like Apple's modems could help with stuff like that too, but we thus far we just don't know. Bless me, sorry guys, I guess. But yeah, if Apple is actually planning to dramatically bump up the cooling capacity here, that would be very, very interesting. And of course, going back to our Nintendo Switch coverage here, is it would be fascinating to see whether or not this, for example, has a vapor chamber, or like the latest Wi-Fi 7 standard, like what Apple is rumored to be building into their next gen self-developed modem. Um, so a lot of interesting competition definitely coming together here, especially once you consider that like the 17 Pro Max with its 6.9-inch screen is at least somewhat comparable to those kinds of gaming, smaller gaming tablets. Yeah, people have complained about previous iPhones with thermal issues. I don't know why people always bring up the iPhone 15 series. I mean, the iPhone 15 series objectively always performed better for me. It still does than like even like the 13 series and the 12 series for that matter. So 5G definitely wasn't a great improvement in that regard. But yeah, if Apple manages to put in a vapor chamber, actually manages to implement it on a level where, well, it's cost effective for them, but it's obviously very, very effective for us in comparison to current cooling implementations. That would be quite cool. So previously, Minchi Kuo actually talked about like an iPhone 17 Pro Max exclusive cooling system that would combine vapor chamber technology with graphene sheets. Whether or not this means that Ming Chi Kuo is wrong or this source is wrong, that we will see once we actually get there. And with that, I'll just look up if there's anything new coming. A big recommendation, guy, is to watch Silo. We just got the finale, I believe, of season 2. I still have one episode to catch up, I believe. And also, of course, big recommendation to watch Severance, which is returning on this Friday, which is today, to the screens. One of the best shows in recent memory. I hope you enjoyed my coverage that went a little bit outside like the Apple Nest. So kind of spread my wings and did my thing. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something. I know most of you are not that gaming focused and stuff like that. As always, before we wrap this up, small recommendation to do all the YouTube jazz, or small plea, I guess. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment, help with the algorithm, and of course, you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. You can become a supporter over on Patreon. And if you actually, of course, understand that I might know a little bit more about the Nintendo Switch 2 than what I even alluded to in this video, you can also become a supporter right here on YouTube. Shout out again to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve for all MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. And as always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. I'll see you then. This is MarkTech tuning out. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Nintendo.